Good evening, good evening. You know what time it is. It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast. As you know, we're in the mainland, and we're about to have a really good time right now. So I don't want you to miss this. Start clicking share, start bringing some people in, type in those names, get your magic going. And you know it's time to keep living. Y'all know who's in the house. It's Dr. Anthony Pinn. I feel trouble on the way, and I don't know about you, but we about real good time. What you like? This is your new life. Grab a dance partner and tell them, hey, you were way more than enough. Go be great. Go do what you love. Do it right here, though. Right now. 3 minutes, go ahead and break it loose. So glad to have Dr. Anthony Pinn. Where do I begin? I don't even know, but I'm going to tell you, it is an honor. It is a privilege. There are so many of you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming. Dr. Pinn, thank you so much for being here. If you do not know, Dr. Anthony Pinn is a professor at Rice University and a religion professor, correction. Let me add a little bit more formality to that, because trust me, he comes with a wealth of wisdom, but a wealth of wisdom does not have a wealth and an experience of life. And so you can write from anything, have not really truly experienced. I'm so grateful as an author of several books. One of my favorite, which I had to bring, is probably nobody else's life. This right here, My Saving Grace. And reading embodiment and the new shape of Black theological thought. He's also written obituary. So we had, got a obituary along with that. So many other things. But he is also, would it be for me to say that you are the father of Black humanism?
Yeah, no, I don't think I can.
Of a claim.
I don't think I can claim that.
Well, thank you for, no matter what, I don't care if you're the uncle, the father, thank you for being the ancestor that paved the way for us to have this conversation, because this is, it is a beautiful thing. You, as we started, I guess everybody knows, I'll say it like this, that you in Texas, so they know how you hang in there. I was Black side. Definitely for someone like yourself.
Yeah, circumstances aren't ideal, but we making it.
Yeah. Look. Well, you know what? I feel like this. As long as we learn how to problem solve, we'll figure it out. The world has been really fully set up for us to survive anyway.
Yeah.
It may be in the words of Lord. So, I'll play with that a little bit more later.
Through.
But yeah, right. One of the things that, these things that have been going. I mean, of course, we just got a brand new administration. We have, in many ways, to having a vice president who is a Black woman. And as I think about the title of this program called Black Love is Black Well, I think I find that love is kind of one of the essences regarding guiding thought for me. And so I brought this in because I said, I would love to hear you talk about, what do you think the future of Black free thought, bodies of liberation, what to expect during this time, and where are we going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, one of the things that we learn from free thought, one of the things we've learned from our Black humanist ancestors is the persistence of possibility. Despite what we see, what we encounter, there is something about our very existence, our demand for recognition that pushes us forward. And so we have a different administration, but a different administration within the same system. Right? And so Blackness will still be disregarded, demonized, and problematized. But despite all of that, our ancestors have positioned us to already and always recognize the persistence of possibility.
This is interesting because I watched the recent talk. Gosh, you just showed on the history of the Black church with Dr. Henry Louis Gates, and I mean, really a lot of the framing was so helpful, and it was also just good to know and recognize your work. And as you talk about this kind of possibility, as it relates to free thought and Black people moving through these kind of demonized, this kind of social violence, if you will, how do we begin to even equip ourselves with developing our ability to have a possibility? Some of us are getting clouded by systemic vision that say that we should be in certain areas or certain categories. I myself, I'm in a doctoral program. I'm moving through the system like anybody would expect, but in many ways, there is no guarantee that possibly someone who is doing interdisciplinary art around religious studies is going to have a job. I mean, Dr. West, love him dearly, studied with him for a bit, while at Union, but he also is struggling with. I know I don't want to ask you to speak on that, but like just the idea of possibility. How do we equip ourselves in this time?
It seems to me one of the things we have to prepare ourselves to do is to develop a new vocabulary and grammar of life. We have to develop ways to name the unnameable, right? And so in terms of this possibility, we can't really understand it and frame it in terms of what has been, right? We don't have a way to describe this in positive terms because we have never encountered the full range of possibility that is marked by our existence. We can only do this by negation. We know what it can't be. We know what it cannot be. But we don't understand, we cannot understand what it can be, right? Because we don't have a history that demonstrates our ability to be together and fully recognize our worth and our value. Right? So we can only do this by negation. So with that PhD in your hand, what that cannot mean for you. Right? With that PhD in your hand, you know what isn't acceptable.
It's often I find myself torn. I ain't gonna say I'm torn because that's not true either. I think in many ways what I approach with is respectability politics. And as we talk about that negation, one of the things that I've been pushing on and playing with lately is need to constantly refine what you beingness, right? And how Black beingness, has in many ways been explained by Dr. James Cone. May he rest in power and things. I've been sitting back with what authenticates the Black experience. and one of the things that came up kind of as a response to what you're saying has been the idea that we do need to kind of name the unnameable. And I think for myself, as I'm processing this, one of the kind of challenges I've been faced to stick with is that I ask myself, how much longer should I participate in a system that actually was not made for me, right? And then when I'm outside of the system, like I am in many ways, it's like, well, why are you outside? Why don't you try to get inside? And so there's this respectability politics game happening. And and I feel like a lot of us as a community are struggling to love ourselves because the respectability politic does not come with the affirmation of that. I mean, you can add it, but that's where I've been sitting, and I've been challenged by it. I've been challenged with it this show is a challenge because it is like, well, last week I had a drag queen on and she was fierce. And now here I have Dr. Pinn. That don't make no sense for people when they got respectability politics. I'm like, look, all Black lives matter, not just some, because I think we all have something to bring to the table. And if we're not in a collective conversation, so I am interested to hear what are your thoughts around respectability politics? How does it shape, the Black experience, the Black life?
So let me say a couple of things. One, I'm not quite convinced there is an outside, that this thing is global. Right? So I don't know that there is an outside. What I will say is that there is existence within this larger system that is marked by comfort and those who recognize and approach it with discomfort, right? Those who are comfortable with playing the game as it has been laid out, and those who are committed to a kind of irreverence. But I don't think there is an outside, right? And so it seems to me that as a people who have been demonized and disregarded, as soon as we talk in terms of Black beauty or Black love, we have named the unnameable, right? Because you're talking about a population that has not been understood in human terms, right? That has not been defined and appreciated with respect to values of love, capacity, a kind of expansive imagination. So as soon as we talk in terms of Black love or talk in terms of Black beauty, we have named the unnameable within a system of white supremacy, right? So it seems to me the mere fact of our existence suggests that on a fundamental level, we know how to say no, right? On a fundamental level, our continued existence is a no to the terms of this system. It is a no to the structures that shape and disadvantage us.
Look, I got some people in this chat over here speaking in tongues. Look,
I think in part our obligation, our responsibility is to help folks see and appreciate what they're already doing to challenge a system, right? To help folks develop a kind of lucidity and awareness of their circumstances and what their very existence, their determination to be, what that constitutes as a form of rebellion. And so as soon as you say, we're going to move, as soon as you say, we are going to appreciate Black life where it is found and celebrate it, right? Without a reliance on a kind of moral code that strangles us. As soon as you say we're not going to do that, you have made a profound statement concerning the importance of our being, And again, it
Yeah,
seems to me in part the challenge is to help folks recognize what their very existence, what their demand to occupy time and space says about their struggle against a system.
that, that, that right there. That's been, and, much of my work regarding the First Unitarian Society and a few other places. Anybody knows the work, that I've been kind of, pushing on heavily, has been the need to decolonize humanism.
Mm-hmm.
It was a
Mm-hmm.
project,
Yeah.
because it requires new voices, different ideas of practices, and so as you begin to even explain some of this, like I'm sitting with the importance of celebration,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the main thing. I'm like, you can't come into these spaces and think that giving me this little small role of,
Mm-hmm.
now we're gonna have this come and speak. Now we're gonna have, like, I was like, when do you just celebrate the fullness of life in these communities? Where it becomes no longer about just intention, but really
Mm-hmm.
sensation, right? Where I
Yeah.
think that is
Yeah.
the beauty of Black beings. It is the
Yeah.
sensation, right? And that there is,
Yeah.
in many ways, the framework for me being a free thought. I'm like, if there was ever a framework for, a soteriology, if you will, the framework of salvation, which we don't even hold a doctrine, I would
Mm-hmm.
be like, the ability to be a free thinker offers a framework of aliveness, and so a lot of these things that you've been, saying about the celebration, the need to honor beauty, aesthetic, like I'm I almost get tired of hearing now the term diversity, as I shared time ago, because I'm like, it's becoming so monolithic. When
Mm-hmm.
people even want to touch anti-racist work, it's becoming so generic and expected that I'm like, I think one of the greatest shifts that we can really offer, the politic, and particularly understand the Black body politic, is that the Black body politic, and you can push on me on this, and I would love it, because one of my thoughts is that the Black body politic is a body of cultural pluralism.
Mm-hmm.
That in many ways, it opens up. When Black people are in the space, you can't help but to have various other intercultural, interrelated,
Mm-hmm.
intersectional conversation. I mean, anyone who engages with celebration as an act of liberation and social justice, you there, and to add that, there's some of the Black body that in many ways said, I'll be loved here. I
Mm-hmm.
never went to my grandma's house and never was fed, like it was like my grandma was like, oh, what you want to eat, baby? It was a very different lifestyle. You got
Yeah. Yeah.
fed when you came
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
house because
Yeah.
somebody loved you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so you bring out that texture. And yeah, I'd love to, yeah, I don't know what you think about that as the idea of like the centralization of Blackness,
Yeah.
kind of a cultural pervasion
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, we need to wrestle with that. But let me just get back to something else, just real quick.
Yeah, no, come on.
So one of the things I deeply admire and appreciate about you is the way in which you are pushing the boundaries of conversation and performance, right? And I really appreciate the way in which you trouble some of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, right? So, from my vantage point, if you want to see the failure of Unitarian Universalism, look at Sunday. Sunday is the failure of Unitarian Universalists. And I say that because for an organization with such an expansive understanding and moral and ethical obligation, such an expansive understanding of religious principles. On Sunday, it renders itself unrecognizable. There's so little that takes place in a typical UU church on Sunday that speaks to its uniqueness, that speaks to its principles, that speaks to what sets it apart. And I think on
Yes.
one level, one of the things I deeply admire about your work is the way in which it forces us to deeply appreciate the horizontal nature of our relationships, and to do that in a way that doesn't take us away from bodies, but that recognizes we really can't get at that, right? We can't understand the nature of community and relationship. We can't ritualize that
Yep.
without the body.
That's it. That's it. And that's been my thing. I'm like, and it's funny because like I have said, I mean, I'm gonna tell him myself, because as I always do, anybody who knows me knows I will. You know, it's like it was hard for me to just rest in the humanist vein and then try to understand what that meant from a Western framework. I sat really in a lot of tension, thinking about, okay, I appreciate this term free thinker. I really like it, but it wasn't about just thinking out of the box. It wasn't just about like, let me just use my intellectual capacity to reimagine. Like that comes, you know, for me. But what I found, you know, and I was like, anytime I describe my experience with humanism, I always make it very clear that I'm a free-formed humanist. Like the fact that I have a form and a body that wants to engage, that work is where you're absolutely right. We missed the mark on Sunday. When you know, whether I'm sitting in at the First Unitarian Society, whether I'm sitting at, you know, at an ethical culture society, these things, you know, I'm like, you got to get up and move. Because you can't talk about humanism and call it a movement if you ain't going nowhere. Especially if you don't have relationship with those that you speak regarding justice, right? Regarding compassion. And let's just be real, compassion within the framework of most humanism is oftentimes a kindness of service, right?
Yeah.
We very seldom talk about love, the real just nuance of relationship. It's the struggle of sitting in the discomfort and having people work to get behind the discomfort. Right? I find that work of practice, practice to be essential to really helping many. You know, as I said years ago, I want people to be able to find a home in me. Because, like, especially my folks, when they experience, I want them to find a home in me. I want someone who is going to be like, I'm glad that you came with all that, because I didn't know if I fit here for a minute, you know? And I often say, I want to create spaces where not necessarily you just belong, but you can become in the process of belonging. Like, that's the process, because and I think that's why I'm like, Black vision cannot be stifled. It's a growing, it's an assertion of growth. That's so I appreciate you for acknowledging that, because that is my work. I do. I love to trouble the water. I'll trouble my own water when I wake up.
and that's necessary, right? And so, and I see the way in which you center embodied Blackness, and I want to think about Blackness in a really expansive way. The way you center embodied Blackness forces humanists in general and Unitarian Universalists in particular to do what they often resist doing, and that is to linger over the misery, right? To linger over what it has meant to be disadvantaged, disregarded, and marginalized. That humanists and Unitarian Universalists, not all, okay, not all, but too many humanists and Unitarian Universalists want to move too quickly to reconciliation without lingering over the misery. You can't take seriously what has happened to a people if you are unwilling to wrestle with what has happened to a people.
Sir.
But they move too quickly.
It's so important.
And we often, it also seems to me you trouble a criterion that goes unspoken. In too many of these circles, the criterion is, I will talk about justice, I will do justice, but I have to be comfortable. Right? You cannot take me out of my comfort zone. You cannot take away from me. My perception of myself is already and always engaged. The number of folks who come to me after we've talked about anti-Black racism and social justice in more general terms, they come to me wanting to understand themselves as being outside of the group being critiqued. You mean those other people, but not me, because I marched with King. You mean those other people, but not me.
Yep. I'm a firm believer you got to go back to those who you were birthed from. And you got to be able to offer them some correction. Yeah. Because it's unfortunate. The system that has been inherited, that white people have inherited, if they really want to break out, they got to speak to what those ancestors, those elders left them. And then in many ways, try to figure out what's going on the inside. Oftentimes when I approach the conversation around, anti-racism, everybody wants to read every book in the world. You cannot read your way out of racism. Right. Cut it. That's how this works. Yeah. You got to get it right with the relationship. And so, one of the things that I've really pushed on is especially my colleagues, is where did you get your narrative from? Who gave it to you? How did it start? And it's funny to go down a path like that. It's a very clerical approach for me, very pastoral care. Like, let me just step in here and just kind of cultivate the story that's been told to you about who you are and where you got this idea, whether you feel superior or whether you just you don't even want to talk about it. I see everybody the same. Yeah. Like, we all, because there's various aspects of how people, particularly white people, want to handle whiteness. And one of the things that I have seen and I've heard, is things like, my mom dropped me off in the middle of a Black community and told me if I kept acting up, she was going to leave me out here in the hood. I was like, whew. Like, and so you already feel uncomfortable just by looking at conditions. And then we think, I was like, so now think about gentrification. Yeah. And then we put that into conversation because they don't realize how those narratives are connected to real social, political issues that are in many ways demonizing and calling Black communities basically that seem were flourishing at one point non-existent, now making them places where everybody want to be. You can't even walk down Harlem and recognize it almost. It's a real thing, it's a very, very real thing. So I really appreciate how you kind of outline those things, because we need to do more work around developing a culture that offers real healing. And I think those conversations have to be correct enough to be like now. Yeah. And we got people tearing.
Yeah. And we have to move beyond strategies of a quick fix. Right? And it seems to me that we also have to, for those folks who are secular humanists, who are non-theists, for example, we have to wrestle with what we are authorized to say. This is what I mean by that. For secular humanists, for non-theists, can we continue to make use of outcome-driven strategies? Right? That is to say, can we continue to assume that if we think right and if we do right, everything changes. I understand why theists do that, because they argue they're not working alone. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, because it's not just us, right? But are we in a position to really claim that sort of view? And it seems to me that we have an obligation to move beyond outcome-driven strategies. And we try to do the right thing. We try to say the right thing. We try to be justice-minded, not because we know it will win the day, but because we can. Simply because it is our last best option, not because we know it will win the day. I think there's something true in what the philosopher Albert Camus says about Sisyphus. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, right? That the victory for Sisyphus is not being destroyed by the task of having to roll that rock, right? That's what the Greek gods wanted. They assumed that this would break him. But the victory for Sisyphus is recognizing his circumstances, being lucid, and not being defeated, not being broken by those circumstances, but persisting. Why? Simply because he could. And I think for us, it means a move away from outcome-driven strategies to a deep bond with an appreciation for perpetual rebellion.
That's it. Yes.
We just continue to push. And where is the victory? In our determination to continue to push.
Look,
at the end of the day, all we may be able to do is say loudly with increased passion, no to injustice. But we can't do any of that if the litmus test again is comfort. I'm a Black male. Now, how can I say I'm concerned with gender bias, but underline that by saying, don't make me uncomfortable?
That's it.
My discomfort is the beginning of my ability to be involved, right? My discomfort is my ability. It is the start of my ability to do differently, to think differently.
Yes.
You can't have change and comfort. You got to pick one. You can't have change and comfort.
Oh,
pick
the things I'm feeling.
And so I see in your push for us to recognize, appreciate, and use embodiment as a kind of physical amen to this sort of thinking. That there is something about our occupation of time and space and the way in which we celebrate this occupation of time and space that is a strike against injustice.
It surely is. I think it's the core thing to also, in many ways, getting back to places that can be decolonized. Because once you figure out your place in time and space, when we think about conquest, when we think about all those empires and everything and how they started, just the sharing of time, how basically time shifted as more empires were being developed and modernization was happening. Like I'm like, we talk about time, time equals money, but we've got to really think about shifting that to being like purpose. Yeah. Right? Focus on purpose, right? And realize that it offers productivity. Like in many ways, there's something, because I don't have much, but I got a purpose. And that's that to me, that's Black thinking, right? You don't have it, but I got a purpose and I'm here and I'm willing to keep pushing, as you said earlier. And then in many ways, I'm gonna use everything I've got within me, which is literally myself. Right? And putting myself on the front line in this way to be exposed, to be vulnerable, and also available. And it takes work, because I don't see that happening in many of our humanist spaces, many of our mainstream, Western church at all. I've never seen any of it, because I'm like, well, y'all don't want to be accountable for the theology being practiced. So now we got a humanism, and now it's like, well, you said you don't have a creed, and you said, but where's the action? So if you don't do the deeds, where is the action? Where is the body? And how will you sit in the trenches with those who you keep saying you're fighting for?
Yeah.
You can't expect for people to operate in that space. So no, we have to pick. We do have to pick. We gotta pick. It's not, you can't be comfortable. I wake up every morning uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to change.
I think there's something about our circumstances that have forced a kind of continuity across the generations, because what I hear you saying in 2021 is what my grandmother said to me in 1980. Move through the world knowing your footsteps matter.
Right.
And for her, that was a way of naming a larger responsibility, that it could not just be my own comfort, right? It could not just be my own success, but whatever limited skills and talents, they've got to be used to help others, right? That you measure your success by the success of your community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that is embodied.
Yeah, we need a collective embodiment. I've been talking to a few others, and I'm like, I really would love to see us all kind of get together in a conversation, and not just a conversation, but then a mobilization.
Yeah.
Right? Where we really are not only connected in mind or in feelings, but we are connected because we decided to really link ourselves together as a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the thing about all of the movements that have developed over time. There was a collective embodiment that had to to say, we are a force to be reckoned with. I link my arms with you, Dr. Pinn, and I'm going to link my arm over here with men. I'm going to link myself over here. And you know, like I do like you do, but I know as long as we're linked, we know that we change that need for just having an intentional community to make it a sensational community to really stir. The whole status quo. I appreciate you. I really do. I thank you.
And we have to, we have, as a nation, we have to linger over what we are, right? So again, I go back to lingering over the misery. If you think of the civil rights movement and you think of the impact of those images of Black bodies being abused, why were they so effective on one level? Because they forced the nation to linger over the misery. Jump to Black Lives Matter. What is it about a Michael Brown, a Rice, a Taylor, a Floyd, right? This forced us to linger over the misery.
Yeah. That's
and
what
a nation that wants to move too quickly.
This is, and want to be comfortable. That moves too quickly and wants convenience and wants to be comfortable. It's not a quick fix situation. This is why I have to have, I often think, I'm like I said, telling myself, but it's like the reason why I have to have so many different kinds of people at the table, is because there is a need to have various conversations. Because when you got trans people, trans Black women dying every day, when you've got rates of young queer boys and girls, when you've got people sitting in the academy who have climbed an educational ladder of scrutiny and institutional oppression, and if you just keep lining it all out, after a while, you gotta say, you gotta look and be like, whoa, call him, and I'm like, you gotta, not survival for us has been a core for existential Black development. It is a core, and that, and the way that we figure out strategies to survive, we share that amongst each other. And that's what's always floored me when, trying to, in many ways, unfortunately, being in the academy and working, because I'm like, you hear, oh, well, you got to go through what I went through. Don't take me through what you fought for. I already know I'm not free.
Yeah.
I think, and there's that piece, and I think in many ways, that's why I appreciate the work that you're doing and what you and Christopher Cameron and all of you, how y'all are just, Saville Hutchison and just, it's like just wedging in there and opening up little by little for folk like me to be like, okay, they doing all this work, they back, it's time to groove. The floor is open, but I already know I'm gonna slip on the floor.
Yeah.
I know others won't be able to groove with me for that minute. And and that's that thing about how we get to Black affirmation, how we get to Black freedom. I think, and we highlight so much of that.
Yeah. You highlight for me a challenge. We are bound to a country that has demonized difference, right? Out of many, one. The melting pot. We have demonized difference. And it's that demonizing of difference that allows this nation to put children in cages. It's that demonizing of difference that allows a country to be comfortable with a Black body left on a street for hours, right? It is this demonizing of difference that allows us to brutalize those we have labeled the other. We have to approach this differently. Rather than understanding difference as a problem to solve, we have to understand difference as an opportunity. And it seems to me that's one of the things you demonstrate, a recognition of difference as an opportunity.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to sit with this. I'm gonna have to reflect on a lot of this because for those of you who don't know, I know y'all have seen this show multiple times. I haven't had the wonderful. This is the first time I'm really sitting with Dr. Pinn. I've read a lot of his stuff, but just the fact that I lean deeply on one of my principles of humanism is starting with the imagination. I don't, then it's troublesome because I'm not using supposed rationale and logic, but I'm like, imagination has so much, rationale and logic already. And I want to say I just appreciate everything that you have in many ways excavated out of me, and it's an intuitive quality that I find that we need more of in our community, and more of in our community as I talk about free thinkers and humanists, that we do operate from spaces where we can, in many ways, in the houseball community, as we would say, read the room. Because you got to be able to read, that's what it is.
You're very, very generous. Let's just build for just a minute. What's the look of a theology that is appropriate for us? Right? What are some of the elements of a theology that's appropriate for? So I'm trying to pull together some of the pieces of our conversation. What is the look of a theology that is appropriate for us? How do we articulate a theology that speaks our truth?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think what it comes down to, for me, it has always come down to realness. I think there's I've always said I believe in the theology of realness, and I say that because being someone who has been a part of the queer community, I know realness has always been used as a Bible skill, number one. And in many ways, if for some of you have seen Pose, you walk and you serve realness. And if you could pass on the stage, 9 times out of 10, you could pass in real life, right? The lived experience. And so for me, it is a survival tactic that authenticates the fullness and affirms the fullness of that person in their presentation and in the definition of themselves, the being able to define themselves. So that is, so I do believe in that to me is the theology of this work for me.
Okay.
It is Theology of Realness. That's where I rest.
Okay, okay. So let's talk a bit about some of the categories within that theology of realness. Right. So how do you think? So let's think in terms of, right. So we both have an appreciation for Cone. Yeah. So let's think in terms of one of the categories that was so important for him: theological anthropology, right? The nature and meaning of the human. Within this theology of realness, what is your theological anthropology? What is the nature and the meaning of the human?
Number one, the human has to be free. And the human is not free even at birth. For me, the human is not free even at birth, because the human is going to be orchestrated into, in many ways, understanding their existence by ways of others. Right? And William Stafford says, if you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, right, then you know, the wrong got home, we may miss our star. This idea that in many ways, that if I really do this work, I've got to begin to shed off this codified performance, that of that whether it's my mother or my father, even, because that's good foundation, but good foundation should spring up new fruit every season. And so I'm a new season for a lot of, our ancestors. I know my ancestors' dream. They would never even imagine what the hell I'm doing right now. They'd look at me and be like, what are you? Where did you come from? And I'm okay with that. But I'd rather be their wildest dream, because in many ways I'm answering, I find myself answering to the prophetic call, which in many ways is me speaking truth to powers that we have not yet engaged with. Power that in many ways we've forgotten.
Okay.
And so for me, I love the idea of anamnesis. One of my professors talks about this very well, but anamnesis, this idea to, recollect what's in the soul. I think that is the form of existence. To have a soul that, and that is that, and whether that be the mind that gives you the freedom, whether it give you the heart. I find that you got to have both the mind, the heart, and the body to, in many ways, shed off that condition of stepping into an existence that is not your own.
Okay. So let me add another category to this, and let me do that by asking a question. So for James Cone, this sort of work takes place within the context of the church. For you, where does this sort of work take place? Where is it home?
Where is home? Home for me has always been, the existence of home for me, and where I locate myself, has been deeply in the studio, in the museums, on the stage. In some of the places that I've volunteered my time, I believe in like taking congregants to, why don't you come to the museum? Because I believe it's in the jazz club. I believe it's there. Because because in many ways, when we talk about blues and it's raw, it's organic. It takes the conversation of the world and then puts it in and contextualizes it and release in a way that soothes the pain, that soothes the discomfort, and then leaves you with something to aspire to. That's where I find home. I find home in the creative venues. That's why it breaks my heart right now that COVID in many ways has shut down a lot of these venues, and artists who are these prophetic voices are not being able to, offer their gift to their fullest. And we have to figure out ways, and I've been trying to figure out using my show as a way to also give that space. I mean, at this point, I've become, I have in many ways become a griot over, over Facebook, with so many others who are sharing the space now, and I didn't expect that, but but I do locate myself in the theaters and in jazz club and everything. Definitely give me a house ball club. I'm good. You about to see everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that with the arts, because the arts on one level call us to imagine, right?
Yeah.
They force us to think in terms of an alternate vocabulary and grammar of life, right? And they pull us beyond the written word, right? They don't let us rest in the comfort of the written word. They call us to something else. And I think Albert Camus is correct that art doesn't provide answers. Art describes experience and calls us to question.
Yeah.
Right. So there are ways in which this art and the arts force us to reconsider.
Exactly. I feel like every movement, even every movement I make, as someone who's a visual consumer, I will always, and this even happened when I was sitting in Cohn's class, because I asked him, I said, what is the artist supposed to do? And I said, you know, this is great. Yeah, I'm fascinated at how many people were able to kind of grab theological material. Now, I'm an art student. I was not even trying to engage with something so dense, and I was like, what does it look like? Give me a subject. Give me a body. Beyond the conversation of a Jesus, give me a body, a modern day body that can, in many ways, practice, not on a pulpit, not in a setting. Give me a body that actually performs it freely. The point where I can see liberation. And honestly, Colin was like, that's your job. That was what he said to me. And I looked at him and it's sitting with 70 other people. And I'm sitting there thinking, this man didn't even answer my question.
But he couldn't. But he couldn't, you know, and it seems to me, in some very important ways, Cohn would agree to this, to our appeal to the arts, right? Think about how he wrote those first two books. He wrote those books with the blues playing in the study at his brother's church.
He did.
Right? He worked in a blue room listening to the blues. And from the early work to the last pieces of published writing, he called us to appreciate and make use of what he called the poetic imagination.
Yep, the poetic imagination.
Experience. Yeah. And through that poetic imagination, be able to name alternate possibilities. And he was critical of ministers and others who refused to make use of this poetic imagination. They weren't involved. They didn't have the right conversation partners.
That's how I feel in a lot of these spaces where I'm like, I thought we were in it, and I have a very visceral response when I see that people cannot engage in an imagination that literally, like, I have never been in a situation where I have not engaged with my imagination to be interrupted by another form of imagination. It is constantly unraveling. And that, I find it so important to define, even through movement, the ability to articulate. I mean, Nikki Giovanni writes in Nikki Rosa further. She says, I really that no white person calls to write about me, so they'll never know how happy I truly was. After she describes a whole entire state of being and condition in Chicago that's uncomfortable, she really makes it very clear that the definition that could be applied to white people on Black experience would never actually hold the same weight. And for me, language doesn't hold me as well as the body does. It's an applied, in many ways, you've got to practice it and then allow for the practitioner to put language to it. When about hip hop, we see that there were a lot of things that were happening with hip hop dance that were unnamed, unclaimed, and they were left as the unknown because there was endless possibilities. And there was a serious imagination at work with the body. So if you opened up some cardboard, you were on the floor, you were on your head spinning, whatever it took. One of the important things that I saw over the years was as it became a formation that got across the globe, then we started having kickball chains. Then we started having, okay, this is the roundabout. Like there were no names for that though. And in many ways, to categorize the body for people to understand how to move, in many ways, for me, negates how the body really is.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. And what a lot of folks mean by spirituality is what I mean by imagination. That is to say, imagination helps us to recognize the deep entanglements of life, right? To become sensitized to the deep entanglements of life. It is an effort to name the unnameable that pushes us beyond the familiar institutions, the familiar infrastructures, and the familiar forms, right? That's what imagination does for us.
Well, look, we try. Look, that's exactly. And I think we need it more now within our free thought movement, more within humans, more in our congregational space. I have no problem doing it. It's cost me. But I tell anybody, I'm not interested in cultural compromise. I'm interested in collaboration. I've done enough of that. Especially when you serve in predominantly white spaces, there's already a cultural compromise. Because it's not even a democratic process, because 9 times out of 10, the majority is white and will never understand your vision. So I already ended in that place. But I look, I can't believe I didn't held you past your time. And I wanna thank you. And look,
you made my day. This has been a joy. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Look, we need to chat again. We definitely need to get. I would love it. I would love it. I really appreciate it. Stay with me for a bit. Justice, let's kick some music for our lovely guests, because they didn't already, they hanging in here to 9 o'clock, loving it. So we're here for it. Look, if y'all are not causing trouble wherever you are, do yourself a favor. Be an angelic troublemaker for Yard Rustin, okay? Y'all know how it is. Y'all know how it is. I'm gonna have to get you to, do some rap with me one day. I heard that you're a lover of hip hop.
I don't think people want that. I don't think the people want that.
Look, it's all good. It's funny because I think in many ways, I just let you know. Friday, we got a woman, Yanni, who's coming, and she's a hip hop artist as well, and she'll be here on Thursday doing a reflection through hip hop. Check her out. She is awesome. Yep, really, really grateful to have her. She's in California. She's an amazing in the collective, trying to bring it out.
You're doing it.
I try, and then at the same time, while I'm trying, as you said, I'm just so we here for it. So good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. Tune in tomorrow. We got Thursday with Amir, who is going to offer us a wonderful dance and choreography, a beautiful story, a song all together in one. So y'all are in for a delightful treat, because if you ain't never seen acrobatics and pole dancing, y'all about to get in trouble today. Okay. In the end, I want to just say thank you for joining us tonight. It has been beautiful. I know y'all have this is like church. We just call it Ethicostal experience over here, though. It's all good. Have a wonderful night. Take care of yourself. Make sure you give somebody love good night. If you don't have anybody to kiss yourself, make love to yourself, and goodness and sexy follow you for days of your life. I know you look good, honey.